Is the RTX 5080 actually good? You guys asked me to run Cyberpunk, CS2, and Marvel Rivals, so here you have it. I currently have the MSI Vanguard 5080 in my Ryzen 9800X3D system, which is running 32GB of DDR5 RAM. For Cyberpunk 2077, I used the game's benchmarking tool in ray tracing overdrive mode to standardize the results. In 4K without any FrameGen, the average FPS was 62. With FrameGen, it was 190 FPS. With the 1440p resolution, it hit an average FPS of 89 without FrameGen and 278 with it. Monster Hunter Wilds beta is currently out, so I decided to run this as well. With the 4K resolution with FrameGen disabled, it hit an average of 75 FPS. With FrameGen enabled, it had an average FPS of 115. At 1440p with FrameGen disabled, it hit 90 FPS, and with FrameGen enabled, it hit 120 FPS. Now, CS2 doesn't really have FrameGen, and I ran it at 1080p just because that's the resolution that people are going to be playing on. So for CS2 at high settings, it hit 585 frames per second, and low settings, it hit 778 frames per second at 1080p. Now, I don't know if anyone's playing Marvel Rivals at 4K, but at 4K with DLSS and FrameGen, it hit 280 FPS. With FrameGen disabled, it hit 190 FPS, dipping a bunch whenever there was Doctor Strange portals. At 4K with DLSS off, it hit 150 FPS. At 1080p with FrameGen, it was about 500 frames per second. With frame generation disabled, it hit 300 frames per second, and with DLSS off, it was around 270 frames per second. Now, one concern a lot of people have about DLSS and FrameGen is that it's essentially AI generating frames in between real frames, which could cause input lag and latency when you're playing competitive titles. There is NVIDIA Reflex, which is supposed to help with this. Let me know if you guys think I should do a blind test, or if there are other titles you want me to test.